SecondsOut, Ayman here with esteemed writer and journalist Gareth A Davies. Gareth, sir, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Pleasure to speak to you. Gareth, let's jump straight into why we're here. It's Artur Beterbiev versus Anthony Yarde this weekend. Unified light heavyweight titles on the line. Gareth, if you're looking at the prospects of Anthony Yarde getting the victory, what would you look at in terms of maybe the holes in Beterbiev's game? Do you see those at all?
Well, he's looked vulnerable early on in fights before when he's getting warmed up. He's 38 years of age. He had a very long amateur career. I think you can get to him early. I think he's a bit like Dmitry Bivol, quite a simple boxer, but once he's warmed up and he's letting his hands go, or once he sees someone in trouble, he's got a great radar, I think, in fights. And I think he's an exhausting guy to be in there with because he's ever present. And obviously, mentally, when you're fighting him, you know he's got that incredible power, and you know that he's stopped every guy he's been in 10 years as a pro. 18 of them, isn't it? So Anthony Yarde's great assets are attack. He's very patient as well. And I think he'll use a lot of educated pressure, if you're asking me how Yarde does it. He has to use educated pressure, and he can't let Beterbiev set a pattern behind his jab, behind a strong right hand, behind those winging hooks he throws in bunches sometimes. Particularly when he notices a dip in other fighters very often. The Gvozdyk performance is the big one in his career, in my view, because there was a time when you thought Gvozdyk, Beterbiev and Bivol were the three great light heavies in the world, and he got him out of the way. It's a very tough night for Anthony Yarde. I think he's got to make it his fight, make it his backyard, put pressure on Beterbiev. Callum Johnson had him down early, and he's very powerful, and I think Anthony carries that kind of freakish power as well. I don't see him boxing him or having trench warfare for 12 rounds and winning it. I think he's got to really try and get the stoppage. This is boxing, remember, and we expect the unexpected. Anything can happen. And I'm talking about all the kind of ramifications that there are here, but I think Anthony's got to give it his all for the first 8 rounds. Educated pressure, not be reckless, and make it his fight. I still favour Beterbiev, and I'd love Anthony as a British fighter. I think we're one of the great upset wins by a British boxer to beat Beterbiev, given his career and his record and all those things. But I still favour Beterbiev to win the fight by stoppage against an exhausted Anthony Yarde, who will have given it his all in that last third of the fight, maybe 8, 9, maybe even 10 or 11 rounds. But I can also see a 6-round Hagler-Hearns war. I sat with both of them yesterday. I had the privilege of presenting a bit this week for Top Rank for their YouTube channel and just doing a bit of presenting. And I got the privilege of sitting down with Artur. Gives nothing away. Even told me that if he had it all over again, he'd choose not to be a boxer because he doesn't like beating people. He doesn't like hurting people. Fascinating character, doesn't crack. Anthony's very relaxed as well. I think this is a different proposition to Sergei Kovalev, who he fought last time, that he came within a whisker of beating, I think. But it's such a terrific prospect because what are they, like 95% knockouts between the pair of them, 40 knockouts in 43 fights or something. Yarde has to take this as his moment. I'm so excited about being here and being involved in it, covering it, being around them, doing the outside broadcast for TalkSport on Saturday night, really living it this week and savouring it.
Gareth, one of my favourite fighters to watch over the last 10 years has been someone like Gennady Golovkin, who in his recent fights has shown signs of regression as a fighter as he's aged. With Artur Beterbiev, though, there are very minimal signs of that regression. How much longer do you think he can go? And when all is said and done with his career, do you think he'll be considered as one of the greats, like a Tunney, Charles, Langford?
He is a modern great. He's a modern great. There's no question about it. I mean, he's 41 now, isn't he? And I think the delay in him fighting Canelo was a travesty. I think he won the first fight. The second fight, I think Canelo pipped. And by the time the third fight came around, Canelo had matured into a very powerful fighter. And as we saw, very soon in that fight with Gennady, he he knew he had the control of the fight, and that's how he boxed him. And Gennady just didn't have that snap anymore, and he didn't have that, maybe that tensile strength that he used to have to be able to walk through people and use his freakish power and levers. But for me, he's amazing. He was the most feared puncher in the world at one time, an absolute gentleman, a credit to our sports. And I've had the privilege of covering many of his fights and interviewing him a few times. Hopefully, history will remember that he won that first fight and something went terribly wrong with the judges' scorecards, because it was a blight on his career in many ways, because I think it was, it was heinous in many ways. But yeah, I think he will. I think he'll be remembered as one of the very greatest at middleweight. With Bernard Hopkins. I mean, I don't think you mentioned Hopkins there. No, but Hopkins as well, remember, record world title run. When you think of Bernard, 6'2", he was an amazing specimen as well. Obviously went up to light heavy. Did he even fight a cruiserweight? Probably light heavy in the end. But yeah, I'd include Bernard Hopkins in there as well.
Would you feel Beterbiev is on that track too?
As a modern great? Yeah. I think he's got to beat Anthony Yarde on Saturday night. I think he's got to beat Bivol. And maybe have a fight with Alexander Usyk. I mean, at cruiserweight, I'd love to see that. Obviously, they've fought, I think it's 3 times. They might have fought more times than that, but I know that Beterbiev beat Usyk in one amateur fight, but lost to him in the Olympics and the World Amateur Championships, the London Olympics, as it happens. He's a very special guy, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I had the privilege of sitting with him yesterday, as I was saying, and he's ice cold. Doesn't give anything away. And that's what I love about both Yarde and Beterbiev this week. They're not into the psychology of getting in the other guy's head. They're into the psychology of their own path, their own track. And they're not bothered by the other person. It's a shape in front of them. They're just concerned about their own game. And with those kind of fighters at this level, you just can't wait for the bell to ring.
Gareth, moving away from this, I want to get your thoughts on, you wrote an article regarding WBC's move with transgender boxing. Can I get your overarching thoughts on it and what maybe the developments are with the WBC?
Well, I thought it was a very interesting move by the WBC. We did a massive spread on it, a big kind of splash in the Telegraph on it. I think they've made the right move. It's what rugby's done as well, which is if you're born a man, you should never fight a woman, born a woman. And I think Mauricio Sulaiman's come out with the right move. We tried to do the story properly. Back in 1999, I covered man versus woman. Margaret McGregor versus Loy Chow in Seattle, Washington. The only time that I'm aware of, certainly in my time covering boxing, that a man and a woman have been sanctioned to fight each other in a boxing match. I mean, he ran all night, by the way, and didn't throw a punch and got battered by her, by Margaret. It was a fascinating thing to cover. And I think we recalled that article and looked at, you can't allow someone that has had the residual testosterone being born a man to fight against a woman, regardless of whether they've transitioned from a man to a woman. You can't allow it. Rugby's the same. They won't allow a man, born a man, who's become a woman to play rugby against women who are born women. And I think that's the right rule. I mean, it sounds very basic, and to me it's common sense. And I think Mauricio Sulaiman did the right thing. That story went around the world, and he even sent me a text, and I think you made me quite popular. And I think we in boxing are used to being pilloried for opinions and all those things. I think he did the right thing. I don't know whether it'll happen. I mean, they've put this thing out that they're going to try and interview or find a league. If there are enough people out there to do it, I don't think there are many out there who box, who is transgender. But I think they've done the right thing, and I think they've jumped ahead of the game. And I spoke to Robert Smith, Secretary of the Boxing Board of Control, and they said they have the same policy as well, because at some point there's going to be a legal case where someone has become a woman and wants to box against women, but they're not going to allow it.
Moving away from that, you're someone who's been readily wanting to or open to crossing over to the Misfits side of boxing, the social media influencer side of boxing. And I wonder what you see the trajectory of that sport, considering that it seems to get a lot of eyes from the fans that follow those creators in the boxing world?
Well, I mean, I cover I cover all combat sports. You know, I've covered combat sports at the Olympics for many years. I've covered mixed martial arts for many years. And I think with the Misfits, I was there at KSI versus Logan Paul in 2018 in Los Angeles. It was fascinating. A different milieu. And, you know, I've been to two here because Talk Sport, you know, I'm part of the commentary team for them, as I am on Saturday night. And we've had two events that we've been to, and it's been very interesting. I think as long as we don't blur the lines and know that it's celebrity YouTube boxing, it's kind of white-collar boxing, really, and that the matchmaking is very clever in terms of, you know, you don't put someone who's had 100 amateur fights in with someone that's just been boxing for a couple of months. You don't do that kind of thing, regardless of whether they're a YouTube sensation. A bit like, what's his name from Love Island, Jack someone or other, Jack Fincham, fought Anthony Taylor in a boxing match in the Middle East, in Dubai. That's sensible because Anthony Taylor is a mixed martial artist. I've known him many years. At least he knows his way around fighting, and we know he's tough. And Jack obviously had an amateur career, 26-odd amateur bouts, I think. You have to be careful with that. I like the eyes on the sport. 300,000 pay-per-view buys just here at the OVO, Wembley, a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I had fun on the night for Talk Sport, interviewing Holly Willoughby with her children and Louis Theroux there, other famous kind of people in British life bringing their teenage kids. It does bring a different audience, a different age group. They were all in at 7 o'clock. They were there till 11, 10,000 of them. That group have hijacked, if you like, the sport. But having interviewed KSI a few times, these guys are massively influential on very young people. And if they're saying what boxing does for them, I think that's a good thing. And I also think that as long as we don't see them as real boxers, then maybe there's things to learn from it and there's things to guard against with it. You know, we believe that Jake Paul and Tommy Fury, is that still on that fight or not?
Seems it,
yeah. February the 25th, I seem to recall. I'm not sure about whether I'm not sure whether Tommy is a true boxer or an influencer. I'm not sure whether Jake Paul is becoming a boxer or is an influencer. All I know is there'll be a lot of eyeballs on that. It's kind of fascinating. There's a lot of jeopardy on Tommy because he's from the Fury family. As Tyson joked the other day, if he loses in Saudi, he better stay in Saudi. I think if you're a commentator, you know, I present, I commentate, I write about boxing. I've been involved a long time. You've got to look at it. You can't just stick your head in the sand and ignore it. We've got to be careful to guard against the fact, obviously, this 5-year deal that KSI has signed with DAZN, with 30 events over those 5 years, with, I think it'll be 10 pay-per-view events. You have to guard that doesn't become the norm. And I think that'll run its course with these guys. When you've got a massive subscriber base, like he has 25 million subscribers, or Jake and Logan Paul, with what have they got, 50 odd or 41 million? I mean, the reach is enormous. Put those two together, that's the population of the UK. So they only need a small percentage to sell out an arena. I think they'll sell out Wembley Arena if KSI and Jake Paul fight this year. I think they'll sell out Wembley beside us. I really do. Or Emirates, or Cardiff. They will, and KSI said that's his ambition. He wants to fight Jake Paul. Good luck to them. The only thing we've got to guard against is the mismatches and people not being hurt, and promoters not moving towards doing that rather than, what we love as the pure boxing. I'm a purist in some ways, but in other ways I refuse to. You've got to adopt and adapt. These are different times. I'm happier that they're involved in our sport than in Tiddlywinks championships or Formula One or darts. Imagine if they were playing darts and that was getting all the audience. Maybe the darts fans would be complaining about it because they're getting bullseyes and 180s. Maybe darts would be interesting. I don't want to start anything here, but I cannot I think you've got to go and witness it, first of all. I love the way the people behave. Even all those massive influences in that milieu are interesting. So to tap into that generation is just interesting for me.
Final topic I wanted to touch on is shift focus to Conor Benn. It seems like, as Riyadh been covering the story, he mentioned that there hasn't been a cooperation between Eddie Hearn, Conor Benn camp, and then UCAD as well. What is the situation there? Why do you feel there's that lack of cooperation?
Yeah, Riyadh's doing a great job on that story. I mean, I also spoke to Robert Smith on Saturday and put some stuff out. It was on TalkSport and on my own Twitter feed that Robert said they haven't had anything back from Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn. It's a real shame. I mean, I can't understand. It's one of the weirdest stories I've ever covered. It's gone on far too long. Where's the transparency? I know it's all sub judice or in legalese, tied up in legalese, but we need an answer. 270-page report went to the WBC just before Christmas. I mean, I'm chasing Mauricio Suleiman for an answer. He said, look, it's highly legal. There's no answer at the moment. We just need an answer. I mean, and Eddie's talking about Conor Benn fighting. You know, I'm a real fan of Conor Benn, always have been. If he can clear his name, clear his name. But let's get some transparency, because there's a cloud hanging over the sport, over that issue. And because you cannot fight if you haven't been cleared, in my view. And I know he's not banned, but so therefore perhaps legally he can fight. But you need clarification on these issues. If you test positive for a banned substance, obviously it was in his body twice when the substances were taken, when urine or whatever it was he gave. So, it needs rectifying, it needs clarifying, because it's not tied up yet, and it needs tying up.
I wonder what you made of Conor's reaction after Chris Eubank Jr.'s defeat to Liam Smith, resounded defeat. Boxing public reacted to it, maybe thought it was the right step to make, having not cleared your name just yet. Innocent until proven guilty for sure, but not cleared your name yet, and talking about maybe knocking out a fighter when that hangs over you.
There's a thing called Schadenfreude, which is celebrating other people's misfortune. I don't think it's a great quality to have, but that's the modern social media world in which we live, and it generates huge views and kind of, it's all a bit of fun in a way. Like, if Conor and Chris fight eventually, rather like their fathers today who go on tour with Gold Star Promotions, they'll be friends one day, 20 years from now. Billy Joe Saunders as well was ripping into Chris Eubank Jr. It's just, when people like Chris, they strut like a peacock and put themselves out there and, be the heel and all those things. When you fall, it's a fall from grace. It's the hubris that you have to suffer when people then mock you on social media. That's part of life. We all get it, unfortunately. I don't really like to indulge in it myself. I'd rather do it face to face. What we used to call bants or banter. It's called bants now, but it's banter and it's fun. I mean, just makes the fight bigger when they do actually fight, and I hope they do fight one day, and it'll probably be at middleweight. But it's all part of the game, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to leave a lot on the table. We can speak about it another time, but it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks for speaking to Seconds Out. Looking forward to more interviews with you.
Cheers.
Appreciate you, sir.